I think we are live. Aloha, patrons and listeners, and all fans of the OokTown podcast. This is Stuart Yoshida, host of the OokTown podcast, where we talk about all things ukulele. And you will notice that we do not have an introduction by our intrepid co-host, Doug Brown. We send out our best to him. He could not make it today. Maybe we'll have him do one later on, and I'll add it in post. But for now, we will just send our good, kind thoughts to Doug and hope he has a great day with his family. So we'll jump right into it. I am so happy to have back on the podcast a musician, performer, instructor, and now an NFT artist, James Hill. James, welcome back.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks for having me on the show.
You are so welcome. James is kind of on the, I'm going to say, the Uke Heads tour. Kind of, like, when they release a movie or an album, right? Yeah. A book, right?
You do Letterman, you do Leno.
Exactly. Right. And you already did the high-profile ones. You were on the Ukulele Underground with Aldrine and Aaron, which I watched. Was a wonderful podcast. So
and tomorrow it's Conan O'Brien. So making the round.
Conan, nice.
No. I was once on the Tony Danza show. Does that count?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
That was in the. Do you remember the Tony Danza show? I mean,
I didn't actually realize he had a show.
Exactly. You see, that's exactly the point. And so he was getting canceled, and my friend Robbie Poznansky from the Big Island had a connection and got me on the show because it turned out Tony had picked up the ukulele.
Oh, nice.
On a whim that year. And so he had me on the show because he knew the show was getting canceled. And so he didn't bother to book anybody except people he wanted to have on the show. Because awesome. What were they going to do? Cancel the show? Right.
Cancel it?
So it was so cool. It was my only time on sort of like big network TV. It was awesome.
Oh, that's great. Nice. Did they still have the green room? So you got to
the green room, and they if I ever find a tape of it, and I think there is a tape of it around here somewhere, I will burn it, because what they did to my hair was so embarrassing. She was like, "Would you like me to straighten your hair?" And I was like, "Sure." I mean, my hair's a bit wild, like with the curls and everything. You can, you just tamp it down a little bit. And she just went for it. And so by the time I come out on stage, my hair was like straight, just pointing straight out in front of me. And I was like I like I'd been hit by the hipster bus. It was amazing. The only time I've ever seen myself like that.
Like 2 fistfuls of pomade in your hair or something?
Yeah, Crisco, straight forward. And with a straightening iron and everything. I didn't even recognize myself.
Oh, that's awesome.
That was just sort of before like YouTube culture, and otherwise it would be enshrined on YouTube.
Yeah, so now I want you to find that tape and share it with us sometime.
Yeah, for a small fee.
Oh, okay. Well, you are promoting this Uke Heads, which has NFT art on it. So I know you've been probably repeating this over and over again, but explain to us this collab album and what an NFT is.
Okay. The most important thing is the music, and the most important thing is the community. So let's just focus on that for a second, and then we can get to that little cog in the machine that is called NFT. That's not essential to understanding the whole thing. So the main thing is that I've always, at least for years since my friend Tony Coleman first suggested it, I've always wanted to do an album where I could collaborate with the ukulele community. And because that, to me, it sort of brings together everything that I've been interested in. It brings together songs and songwriting and education, because people would have to learn the songs, they'd have to perform on the songs. They'd probably have to use some technology, which I've been involved with a lot. The idea of communities that spread around the world, all of these things that I've been really involved with. Having an album that other people can play on is sort of the thing that unites all of those strands of what I've been doing. So that's the main thing. And so that idea of like let's have an album that everybody can play on, as opposed to what was more conventional for me and a lot of ukulele players, which is sort of, here's what I do, you listen and I'll play. That's good too. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the ukulele is such a hands-on instrument. Is there a way that we can break that fourth wall? I've always been so interested in that.
Wow.
And I carried that around in my pocket for years, thinking, if I ever hear of a thing that enables that, I'm going to jump on that thing and learn everything I can about it. And when I started to hear about NFTs, my first thought was, this might be that thing. And that's what got me interested.
Well, that is interesting, because my understanding of an NFT, I didn't understand. I don't see the connection quite on how that helps collaboration. Is it just for help enticing people to collaborate, or is there a built-in way of collaborating with the NFT?
Well, that's a great question. You could think about it this way. An NFT, which is just a digital version of something that you would collect. Like as a kid, I collected comics and hockey cards. Those were my two things. I didn't really get into stamps or coins or anything, but I did have some hockey cards and I had some comics that I bought.
Right.
And I enjoyed that. NFTs are just a digital version of those physical products. They're one of a kind. There's only a set number of them, and that's it. And until recently, we didn't have a way of doing that in the digital world, because a copy is a copy is a copy is a copy. They're all the same, right? NFTs are a way of just proving that you own that thing. And so...
okay, all right.
So imagine like selling tickets to a project like Uke Heads, where everybody who buys a ticket gets to come in, record on the album, and that's cool. You could do it as a ticketed event kind of a thing. But now NFTs kind of take that to another level, because an NFT, the T part is token, non-fungible token. So you can think of it as your token becomes your ticket to the experience. And the nice thing about an NFT is that it has a life beyond the event. Like when you get a ticket, you go to the event and you enjoy the event, I hope, and then it's over. You might hold on to that ticket stub for the Super Bowl because it helps you remember that moment. But the ticket itself doesn't have any value after the event.
Okay, all right.
When you buy an NFT as a ticket to an experience, now that thing also has a life beyond the experience. Okay. It becomes something that you could gift to somebody, something that you could sell to somebody, something that you could hold on to and see what other value comes out of it. For example, when we're finished with the Uke Heads album and it's released and we've gone through many months of online workshops and recording and just hanging out and having fun with it, there may be other songs that I want to do where I can get the band back together and get all the Uke Heads back together for a song or a single, or there might be discounts that they get on events, in-person events or workshops or concerts or things in the future. Because they hold that token, they get access to a bunch of other things that they wouldn't if it was just a ticket for one event.
Okay, all right. This makes more sense to me than selling a digital picture like they're doing, because it's like, okay, great. So you, quote, own that picture, great, and you can prove that you're the current owner. But it seems that most people would want to just, go, hey, I just need a copy of that photo, and if you just display it for me, I'll just do a screenshot, right?
That's right.
Whereas this is more like a ticket to an experience, I guess. I don't know.
That's right.
Not quite
it's
clear.
It's exactly that. It's a ticket to an experience. You just said it perfectly. And, it's a ticket that comes with perks, basically.
I see. So you can give me my NFT a little after the show then.
I will, actually. I have one put aside for you. So,
are you kidding me?
No, I'm serious. Serious.
Wow.
And Doug as well. So,
right.
So, in the past, we've also seen the rise of things like crowdfunding, right? Crowdfunding is something that's familiar to everybody at this point. in fact, it's maybe a little too familiar at this point. Here's another Kickstarter that I'm doing, and if you buy my album in advance, I'm going to send you a lock of my hair in the mail, and I'm going to write you a poem, and I'm going to land in your backyard in a helicopter, and we're going to have champagne dinner together. It's like, okay, but for me, a lot of those perk-based schemes distracted a lot from the music. Like
you can spend a lot of time doing that.
Artists are so busy as it is, making this music.
Exactly. As Danielle at the Sandwich went through that, where she was like, "Man, I got to figure out a way to do this and not have a lot of time and effort, because I got to focus on the music." And so I think a lot of artists figured that out.
And a lot of fans, unfortunately, figured it out the hard way, because what happened at the beginning of Kickstarter, it really boomed, and fans were spending money, and they were supporting the artists they love, which was totally great. And then other artists saw that, and everybody jumped in the pool, and then all of a sudden artists had to start promising more in order to stand out from the crowd. And the more they promised, they had to promise more than that and more than the other guy. And the fans started getting disappointed because the artists couldn't deliver on these promises. And the whole thing caved in because you lost trust in the system.
Well, even these Kickstarters where they're offering to build something for you. Oh, we got this new fancy schmancy ukulele that self-tunes, and you tell it what key you want to compose in, and it'll do it automatically for you. And then they never deliver, years later, and you just, like, it says clearly on there, no guarantee that this will be delivered. So I think, just the whole concept, though, of, I still like the idea of being able to say, listen, fans, I'm doing an album and I'm an independent artist, so I want to fund this by advance sales. And I don't know if that's flying nowadays. I mean, because I think that's a lot of what these Kickstarters are morphing to. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that's kind of where it funnels to, because the artist was going to make the album anyway. That's something that they can do, and it's the thing that they ought to be focusing on. The artist shouldn't be spending their time doing everything but the music in order to raise the money to make the music. It's a sort of a downward spiral, and and we found that even at the beginning of social media days, you found artists we just couldn't practice. We couldn't write. We couldn't record because we were so busy feeding the feed. And coming up with that latest tweet, and coming up with that next Facebook contest, and all of a sudden you're like, I haven't practiced in 3 months. And I think you get a bit of that with the sort of Kickstarter world as well.
Well, I do the worst of both worlds, where I don't practice and I don't do the social media thing very well. So, here we are. But yeah, I'm okay with the one where the artist just says, listen, I want to do this. I need some funding up front. And I'm all on board with that. I've funded things, funded Danielle and I think maybe Victoria. But
me too.
I've also funded, speaking of comics, I'm a collector, and there's an artist named Mike Kaluta who's fantastic. I mean, he's just an amazing illustrator, and a writer named Elaine Lee, and they wanted to do a project, but the publisher wasn't able to fund the colorist that they wanted to hire. So they said, hey, we're gonna do this Kickstarter, and we need some funds so that we can hire this amazing, and he is an amazing colorist. And so I was like, yeah, I'm in. But they still, even at that, and they funded it fully, I believe, they still had a hard time pulling it off. And I think it's just because even with that, there's a lot of overhead, I guess. I don't know. You would think that, okay, so they funded it 100%. In fact, I think a little bit more, but it was still hard.
And
what do you think that is?
Well, I'm not sure exactly in that particular case, but I know on the music side of things, a lot of artists get caught not taking into account the expense of the perks. So even if you say to everybody, I need 1,000 people to support me at $50 each or $25 each or whatever, and then I'm going to send you all whatever it is in the mail, and whatever it is, if it's more than letter size, you go to the post office and you realize that you've just spent half of your fundraise on sending the perks to people, and I've seen that happen. Myself, my wife, a lot of our friends have fallen into that trap.
I think that's exactly right, because I believe in this case they were promising people at a certain level of funding that they would send them an early copy, and to produce that early copy, I think they underestimated what it would cost and how much it would take. So
well, and all of this really circles back to the point of Uke Heads, because when you think of all of the stuff that people have in their house, all of the stuff we have these days, we're surrounded by stuff. We're just swimming in stuff. I'm looking around here at my cluttered desk going, man, so much stuff. What would it be that would get people really excited about playing the ukulele? What would it be that would really get people talking and feeling like this was an opportunity that they had to be part of? Well, one thing I can offer is, hey, once in a lifetime, come play on my album. You have your name in the credits. You can say to your grandkids, I'm on this album. And by the way, I'm going to gift you my NFT and my will.
There you go.
And you're going to be part of this global ukulele ensemble, when I'm gone. These ideas are beyond what we've ever been able to do. And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, that is really a great incentive, because, you can tell your friends, your spouse, your partner, hey, I recorded a CD, with James Hill, and and
you'll be able to say that forever and ever, and nobody can take that away from you, and it doesn't take up any room in your house. It's not that kind of a perk. It's an experience, and to me, that's as powerful as anything, if not more.
Oh, very cool. Well, I think I do believe some of your target audience and consumers will still value the CD. So I'm assuming you're going to have a way that they can order a physical copy, because I'm just saying there's still this. In fact, I think I'm going to pigeonhole ukulele players, but there's a significant...
I think I know where you're going with this.
You know what I'm going to say.
Now, I want to see you navigate this next sentence.
Hey, I can say this because I'm of that age. That's why I can say that.
All right.
People don't know, but I am quite a bit older than I may look like. But that generation is still like... Where's my physical copy of a CD?
Right.
I'm like, it's digital. Come on, are you kidding?
Yeah.
That's the purest form. No, I want to hold it and see it.
Well, you know what? I'm younger than that demographic by a little bit, but I'm still of that mindset. And I'll raise you one, and I'll say, not only are we going to get CDs made, but I'd like to do a limited run of vinyl.
Yes, and that is so weird, though, that this younger generation is fueling the vinyl comeback. Yeah, because did you talk to Victoria about her experience with getting the vinyl pressed?
No, I've done it already for 2 or 3 albums of
Have
mine.
you really?
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
You must have an in. 'Cause she was trying to find a shop and she went to the, I guess, the popular ones, and I think she said there was like a 2-year wait list or something ridiculous. So she had to find another vendor to master it, because that's the real art, right? The mastering of the vinyl. Right. It's not the same as a digital. Wow, that's good. I'm glad you're thinking ahead on that, because I'm pretty sure people are like, I want to order a CD and a LP also.
Well, especially when the project is centered around the artwork. I mean, to me, you want to hold that in your hand, and especially when it's bragging rights, where you want to say, look, there's my name, I'm on the record,
right?
And
right.
Here's my uke head in the liner notes.
I think you're going to sell a lot of LPs because those CDs, they're too small.
That's right, especially when you have 1,879 participants. It would have to come with a magnifying glass, so you could see, So I think for a lot of reasons, and plus the fact that I'm a vinyl appreciator, and it's almost all we listen to in our kitchen is vinyl.
Oh, is that right?
And I used to spin vinyl as a amateur DJ at university. So
no kidding! Wow.
I've got vinyl all over the place here, and
you've got
for
some
all
analog
those reasons,
cred. Then wow.
For all those reasons, I really want to do that vinyl run. I'm putting it out there because it'll make me accountable. A year from now, people say, "Remember, you said
right.
vinyl."
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of demand for all the reasons you said, and just because of because of the illustrations, the pictures that you're going to have, and being able to find your name, you'll never be able to do that with a little CD, for instance.
That's right.
I guess there's something about just showing, bringing out for your kids or whoever, bringing out an LP and showing them the picture, And,
that's right.
Yep, there's mine right there.
That's right. That's me. I'm the part of the Uke Heads sort of promo stuff is which Uke Head are you? Mm-hmm. And I don't know. Can I screen share here?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. Sure.
Yeah, down at the bottom there should be.
Do you want me to try it?
Yeah. No, I know it works, and all I need to do is you just hit share, and then I will add it to our stream.
Okay.
That should work. At least it works for Doug. There it is. It's coming up. Okay, got it.
Okay. Can you see the Uke Heads?
I'm adding it right now. There it is.
Okay. So if your listeners are not just listening, if they're also watching, and they don't know what Uke Heads look like, this is what they look like. They're these sort of whimsical portraits, really, of the ukulele. And there's 1,000. Yeah. 1,879 of them. None of them are the same. They are all unique. And
that's amazing.
It's funny how the ukulele, when it's turned around like that, actually does kind of look like a head. And I've often found that at shows or at workshops, sometimes people will take their photos and they'll do that. They'll put their uke right in front of their face, and it's kind of a funny shot. And so I sort of ran with that idea and just gave them a lot of personality and a lot of love, and that's what we've come up with.
And I got this from the Ukulele Underground interview, but that's something that you took up recently, right? Is doing graphic arts. Is that correct?
Not recently. I mean, I've been doing it all along. It's sort of, I have to say, for up and coming, especially younger artists, one of the best things that you can do for your career is learn how to do one thing that nobody thinks you know how to do. And for me, that was web design and nice. Graphic design.
Wow.
Because I was able to save so much money. Of course, it was money I didn't have, so I didn't really have the option. I had to learn how to do some of these things.
No, that's great.
I could have done a Kickstarter. But, in my early years as a performer, and I've been 20 years now since my first album. And in those early years, I couldn't afford to have a website built. I couldn't afford to have the graphic design done by somebody else. And yet I was able to continue to just sort of push forward just by the sweat of my brow, because I was willing to learn a couple skills that nobody thought that I knew. And so all I'm saying is, for younger artists, maybe you're really good at like booking shows, or maybe you're good at writing press releases, or but you've got to have a third arm of some sort. It can't be just, unless you're independently wealthy, it can't be just you and your ukulele and your beautiful song. That's nice, but unless you've got a bag of money somewhere, you're not going to be able to fund enough noise to get noticed. And if you just have one other leg to stand on, and for me it was the graphic design, and so here I've really just leaned into that and said, nice, these are my Uke Heads, and all right. I want
so
you
that
to
was
have
your
one.
hidden talent is your graphic art. background, and that you've been doing that basically all along.
Yeah, it's my. I don't know if it's my hidden talent, but it's my hidden interest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, I would say those look very, very fine and very awesome pictures. I'm still looking at the unicorn one. I think that one would actually. I think whoever gets that one, they're going to be able to sell that one for a higher price.
There's a few with the unicorn, and there's even one. It's one of the traits that runs through the whole series. So you'll find some of them with a unicorn. There's actually a few double unicorns that have like, two, and there's even a few with like a unicorn mane where it goes straight back over with like 4 or 5 spikes. But the thing is that they're all sort of generated based on the same traits, and so they all kind of look like they're distantly related to one another, but they're not the same.
Right.
Which to me is kind of like, that's cool. That's how the ukulele world is, like we all have something in common.
There's so few degrees of separation in there. I know
That's right.
Most of the artists that you probably interact with, Victoria, Aldrine. I bet you if you mention more, I go, oh yeah, I know who they are, or I've met them. It is such a great tight-knit community.
It is.
Hey, before we get too far, I want to see if you would play some music, because people seem to like that when our artists have our guests have some original music to share. And
yeah,
I know you've got a couple baritones around there. Now tell us I know you've been playing baritone for a while, because I've seen you, and is this like half and half now, or do you just occasionally,
No, I play baritone a lot now. I started really swinging toward baritone on my album, The Old Silo, and that was produced by one of my favorite artists, Joel Plaskett, here in Dartmouth in Nova Scotia, and he plays a lot of tenor guitar.
Yeah.
And I really fell in love with that sound of him playing tenor guitar. And I guess I was trying to capture a bit of that sound and still stay within my, true to my ukulele roots. And so that's where I became really interested in the baritone, and I really haven't looked back.
Wow. So what song do you have for us here?
Well, I'm going to give this a whirl. I don't even think I've ever played this sort of all the way through without the band, like I've been working in the studio with like all the layers and all the sounds, and this one is called Hearts on Fire.
Is this your bebe ukulele?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know what bebe is, it's just what do you call that? Acronym or something for the names of the strings. So it's B E B E. So you only got 2 notes, even though there's 4 strings.
Yeah.
So you get some cool possibilities, and I like to give it a bit of attitude.
Yeah. Add some grit to it.
Yeah, some grit. So let's try this. I'll be making up the arrangement as I go here.
Nice.
This is Hearts on Fire. Did the soul dog learn to shake apart? Is there one more song in that old guitar? You gotta keep your eyes peeled for a shooting star. Dogs go to heaven, men go to Mars. Oh, the water is wide. I'm a seabird, I'm a sailor. Hold me no more. I'm a lion and a tamer and a black sunrise comes over the blue-eyed hills, and my heart's on fire still. to swim, or the tree to stop dancing in the wind. I sing hey little little when my ship comes in. Take me to the place that I've always been. Oh, the mountain is high, I'm an eagle, I'm a stray bird. Hold me no more, I'm a lion, I'm a tamer, and a black sunrise comes over the blue-eyed hills, and my heart's on fire, and my heart's on fire, and my heart's on fire, and my heart's on
Woo! All right, so I think you just nailed the solo arrangement. I mean, I can't even believe you haven't done that before.
No, that's the
solo.
first time.
Really? Well, I think you just found the arrangement there.
I like that. I like that sort of build up there at the end.
Yeah.
You know, just like there's not much to the song, so you're like it's more like a exercise in pacing.
Okay.
You know?
Well, I love kind of the I don't know if it's not necessarily a drone note, but you know the repeated patterns and you know, and you and I was interested that with the bebe tuning, so to speak, you can have that dissonant effect pretty easily because you know they're basically octaves, and then you can just modulate that. So
yeah,
when you were doing that on the Ukulele Underground, I was like, oh yeah, that's a cool effect there. You know?
Yeah, and I didn't really do much of that in that tune, but if you were gonna get more bluesy, I'll just show people what that's like, because it's a really neat effect. And I've been messing around with this tuning for years now, and in the fiddle world, they call this type of tuning cross tuning. So
Is that right?
It's not a totally new idea that you take 4 strings and use only 2 notes, and you get some really weird and unexpected things. And as I've said before, you know, the great thing about alternate tunings is that it humbles you. You know, you really don't know what you're doing anymore, which is so wonderful. For people like me who have spent years thinking they know what they're doing, being pulled back down to earth by an alternate tuning is a really refreshing experience.
Nice.
So if I were to take 2 notes, for example, I'm going to turn off that tremolo because it makes it sound like it's vibrating. That note and this note, you know, they're straight across from each other.
Right.
They're the same note on 2 different strings, exactly the same note, unison, not an octave. And if I bend one of them, you know, you can hear that almost like a church bell.
Yeah. Well, that's what
kind of
isn't
a
that what
clang.
chorusing is? Because you know when you have a choir singing together, they're never
Right.
quite in tune.
Right. So it's the slightly out of tuneness.
That sounds like a clang. That's
it
awesome.
It sounds like you know, like something ricocheting off a kettle drum or something. You know, but so on its own, it's pretty stanky. But if you were to build that into a solo, you know, where you really want it to growl, let me try one like there. Just a little more growl. If I go like... fighting against each other.
Yeah. That sounds so bluesy.
You know.
Yeah.
And those kind of sounds, like you can get those sounds on the guitar, but this is a distinctly like ukulele way of getting to that place.
Yeah,
you know, it's like I really think that a lot of musicians and a lot of instrumentalists, they want to go to the same place. It doesn't matter if they're playing the banjo or the guitar or the ukulele or the fiddle or whatever. There's a desire to end up in that same emotional place. And we all find different ways of getting there. But like I first encountered that phenomenon when I heard banjo as a teenager and just like flipped out over the sound of the banjo. And I was really, deep into my ukulele, studies. And I thought, how can I get that sound? I didn't know anything about Scruggs style banjo. I didn't know anything about clawhammer banjo. And so I sat down and I invented a way of playing that I called cherry picking, which I used on a tune on one of my albums called Song for Cherry, which is where the name came from. And I ended up using this cherry picking style to imitate the sound of the banjo. And it did a pretty good job. It was a lot like the effect of clawhammer. But I'd gotten there in a completely different way. And when I learned about clawhammer, I it was one of those like facepalm moments where I was like, oh, that's what you're doing.
I could have done it a lot easier.
I could have saved a lot of time. But
it's too funny.
The thing is, I wanted to get to the same place.
Yeah.
And so whether you're doing it with the ukulele and finding your way, whether you're getting there with your guitar or with your fiddle, it doesn't matter how you get there.
Right.
The fact is, did you get there?
Yeah. Well, and the Hawaiians did, I'm sure, the same thing when the Paniolo left their guitars there behind. They never left them any instructions on how to tune it, so they had to come up with a tuning. Yeah, and they said,
talk about altered tunings.
Yeah, they had no idea. So they said, let's try this, and I don't know how they did it, but good on them. And
they did it. I think they did it slowly. Like you innovate slowly, and you play every day, and you make mistakes, and you pass those mistakes on, and you talk to other people, and it's this very homegrown, to use a very overused word, an organic kind of experience.
Well, for them, it was totally organic. They had no other choice.
Yeah.
No instructors.
I think, and this is going off the rails a little bit, I realize, but I've often said to anybody who will listen that I really think that the Hawaiian way of learning and teaching has a profound beauty and wisdom to it. The Hawaiian way, at least that I've experienced, is the way where you go and you sit with the master. And you imitate, and you hear the stories. And as a young person, I would go to workshops with Uncle Edward and Uncle Dennis Kamakahi, and I would be sitting there with my ukulele, ready to play, and I'm like, okay, when are we going to start playing the scales, and like, when are you going to start showing me the chord positions? And they would just tell stories.
Yeah.
And I would leave there so frustrated. I mean, they were great stories, and we had a lot of laughs, but I'm thinking to myself, what was that, a workshop? And it took me, it took me a long time to realize the depth of the teaching that I was witnessing. And I really do think that this very, very slow burning, multifaceted, very patient way of teaching and learning is the real thing. That is the real way to do it. However, it does not align with our current rhythm of life.
Yeah,
right.
And
you go to a workshop,
YouTube culture.
You got 90 minutes. I want to know the truth in 90 minutes because I paid $35 and I'm not leaving here without that handout.
Exactly, because this handout has all the secrets of the universe, and if I just read this handout 1,000 times, I know I'm going to be the next James Hill.
And I'm not going to practice. Don't get me wrong. I'm too busy to practice, but I will put it under my pillow. I guarantee. And it's like, wow, these two cultural, streams could not be more different.
Wow.
We simply don't make room in our lives for that way of learning and teaching that I've experienced in Hawaii.
We could go by the way, your 1879, we're going to go into that because that is a direct reference to Hawaii and the
Yeah.
ukulele. But, you know, the quick hits that you get from YouTube that give you such positive, dopamine and adrenaline, I think is the problem because I'm sorry, but I use it all the time. It's like, oh, this is broken. How am I going to fix it? Oh, yeah, let's look it up on YouTube. Oh,
That's
just
right.
follow along and I can fix my dishwasher. I don't have to call up the the repair
right.
guy,
Yeah.
and I just saved myself $100. So, I'm putting that away
Well,
for my, go ahead.
I've always said that YouTube is about two things. It's about wow and how.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah,
If you want to
that's
have a
true.
YouTube video that goes anywhere, it better be, wow, I've never seen that before. Hey, buddy, come and check this out.
Yeah.
Or it better be how to unclog your toilet.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are the only two things that are going to move the needle on YouTube. Wow and how.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of great videos on YouTube that have, I'm wondering, why doesn't this have 1 million views? It has,
Right.
it has 2,500 views, and this is a great piece of work. Oh, yeah, right. It's not wow. And it's not how. That's why it doesn't have 1 million views,
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the nature of the beast. I'm not saying it should be different.
Mhm.
I'm just saying, for people uploading to YouTube and wondering why more people aren't paying attention, it's not because your stuff isn't good.
Yeah, no, you
Maybe
got
it
to
just
put a
doesn't
lot
fit
of
one of those two lanes.
yeah, you got to put a lot of thought and effort into getting it into those two lanes, and when you do both, that's when you get millions of hits, right? It's
That's
like,
right. When it's like
wow.
a really entertaining plumber,
Yeah, right.
that they're just gonna crush it.
Oh yeah, there's a guy, Mark Robley, whatever. He did the glitter bombs. Anyway, I'm sure some people will know about that, and it's a wow and a how, and
Right.
it's this surprise thing where it's a glitter bomb, and you're going wow, and then he goes into depth on how he actually
How
did
to
it.
do it? Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
and so you nailed it. You nailed it. But let's talk a little bit about 1879 then. So you
Sure.
tell us about what you have on here, your shirt.
Okay, this shirt that I'm wearing. Anybody who knew me in high school will be amazed, and not necessarily in a good way, that I am running a clothing company. Anybody who knew me and knew, like, I did all my shopping at the thrift store, and I really looked like I just a disheveled, ne'er-do-well all the way through high school. And the fact that I'm running a clothing company now is just, it shows that God has a sense of humor. So 1879 is my brand, my ukulele clothing brand, and that's the very short version. And the longer version is it's a way of celebrating I guess I would say the spiritual birth of the ukulele in 1879. That the arrival of the Raven's Crag from Portuguese Madeira. That incredible journey over 400 days at sea, and the final sort of arrival, and to think of the joy they must have felt.
Yeah.
Arriving in Honolulu,
Right.
and to imagine that sound, as one of them jumped off the we're talking about plumbers. I think the guy who actually just Joao Fernandez, I think he at least was part-time plumber, and
is
he
that
jumps
right?
off the.
Didn't know
I'm
that.
pretty sure that's right. Don't quote me on that. But he jumps off the ship and he starts playing. The rajau, or the machete, or the very small, very portable instrument that he had
Version
brought,
of it,
four-string
yeah.
instrument, and that was the first time that Hawaiians and people living in Hawaii had ever heard that four-string sound. And within 10 years or less, the ukulele was born, matured to the point where it was now the national instrument of Hawaii. And you can really trace it back to that day, because it was the arrival of a ship, and all those things are documented. We know the day when that sound first came to Hawaii. I mean, imagine if you knew the day that, like, a certain species of bird first,
was born.
first, like, sort of stumbled upon the island of Hawaii, and they're like, "Whoa, here we are! This untouched paradise." We know the exact day when the ancestor of the ukulele
Right.
made port, and to ukulele players, that's kind of that's a real marker in time.
Yeah. Well, and it so embodies the whole idea of Hawaii, because say what you will, but the Hawaiians were so welcoming, maybe too welcoming of immigrants. Okay, so that was part of the problem. And they were so open to other cultures and people coming to an extent. I mean, they warred and they didn't like everything. They were kind of ticked off at Captain Cook after a while. That didn't end well. Yeah, that did not end well.
No.
However, on the whole, maybe they embraced it a little too much for what happened later. But look at that. Then here comes the ukulele, and they just embraced it. And like you said, within a few years, 10 years, you said, wow, it's the royal instrument, and they're all learning to play it, and that's amazing.
And what I like about 1879 as an idea and as a symbol for all of this is that it doesn't belong to anyone. I think it's when you have a cultural intersection like Hawaii at that time was a bit like New Orleans as jazz was developing, just such a cross-pollination of so many cultures.
Yeah.
And that there's going to be some wild stuff that comes out of that. And that was very, very much the case for Hawaii as well. But what I love about celebrating the moment in time is that it's something we can all relate to. It's something that we all participate in. We all feel the passage of time, in a way that is beyond cultural boundaries. And over the years, we've talked about how I've been interested in graphic design, and I've always liked apparel, even though I've had pretty questionable fashion sense. I've always liked apparel because what it does is it combines two of my great loves, and those are graphic design and community building.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
Those are when those two things come together, you naturally get apparel, because that's the way that we signal to each other. This is the kind of thing I do. Hey, maybe it's something that you do. Maybe we should get together and create a community. And so, like it or not, I'm funneled into this kind of like apparel world because I'm so interested in those two other things.
Well, you would fit in really great with the Zoolander Derelict product line, if you know what that.
I don't actually.
Oh, you don't?
I mean, I know Zoolander, but I don't think I've actually watched the movies.
Oh, look up the scene with when they introduced the Derelict line of clothing.
Okay, I can just imagine that's.
it's awesome.
It's going to be hilarious.
Oh yeah,
like that School for Ants. I saw that.
Oh right, the school for They showed him a model of his school,
right.
And he goes, "But how can they do? Look, no."
Is this a school for ants?
Yeah.
So
yeah, sorry.
I have tried many times over the years to hone in on something that would be universal to ukulele players, that would celebrate the ukulele and our connection through ukulele, but something that you would actually want to wear. This is a big deal. I mean, okay, maybe this isn't everybody's idea of a cool design, but I like it, and it's not too on the nose,
Right,
like,
right. Yeah,
I could sit down.
Actually, I just figured out that the 8 is an ukulele body.
There
so
you see.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so it's not
like,
right. It doesn't
that's
smack
good.
you over the head.
Yeah. I like
and we
it.
have other shirts that say ukulele established 1879 to be
Right.
a little bit more clear. But
Okay.
now we're starting to move away from the more explanatory, and because the 8 is the ukulele, it still maintains that connection. It's a great conversation starter with people.
Yes. Yeah.
And it doesn't whack you over the head with it, because I felt like a lot of the ukulele apparel that I was seeing online was more like, like, pull my finger and I'll play you a song. It's and it would say like funny things on it, and it would be kind of garish and like sort of
right. Because
and I was like,
that
I
was
don't-
the
I'm not
right,
gonna
because
wear
that was the kitsch that they had with the early, the first wave of the ukulele. Well, I mean, the original wave was with the Hawaiian monarchy, I would say, but also the commoners.
True.
Also the Kama'aina, and then the next wave was kind of a little kitschy, I think, when it came out, and I like it that this is more subtle. And you're speaking of the crossroads and cross pollination that happened, but that is a perfect example of that. And it was Hawaii's addiction to sugar that actually brought all these things together. But it did it. The outcome was good. They wanted more sugar, so they needed more people, because unfortunately the Hawaiian population was not robust at that time because of all the the diseases brought in by Western by the
Right.
people coming in from the mainland and all over. And so they had to find laborers, and that's where they go, hey, Portugal, you got some people you want that want to work for a little while?
Well, not only do you want to work, but these folks from Portugal, they were facing terrible situation there, with drought, and they couldn't get work, and the vineyards had kind of dried up literally, and these people were on the adventure of a lifetime, and they get on that boat. They know they're very likely never going back to Madeira, and they're just forward-looking adventurers, not even knowing if they would make it. I mean, that is a harrowing trip, right?
Yeah, around the Cape of Africa, I think, the Horn of Africa, right? Because
I thought they went South America, and then up to Hawaii.
Oh, could be, yeah.
But around the Horn of something.
A horn of something, because you can't get there. There's
no Panama Canal.
Path. Yeah, exactly.
And what a harrowing trip that must have been. I think there was the report I read was that the 4 babies were born and 3 people died.
Wow.
This was a microcosm of its own little world. It was moving across and up to Hawaii. And again, if I sometimes think in my sort of my imaginary the video that plays when they arrive and they jump off the ship and they're playing those first chords. Maybe I'm in a jam session at a bar and we're playing Wagon Wheel for the 9400th time, and I'm thinking, oh, ho hum, and I think back to that moment in 1879, August 23rd, and I think, if I could capture or tap into the one sliver of that joy of surviving that trip and coming to a new land with new possibilities. Yeah. If I can embody even a tiny little bit of that, and I am connected to that through this instrument, you can dig deep and you can find that wellspring of joy in the ukulele, even if it is a song that you don't love to play. You are connected to that, and I think that's important.
I think that's a great thing then for the people who play the ukulele and wear the shirt and get the shirt, is that we can tap into that, because I don't know if people really understand all that the ukulele has gone through to become what it is today, right? The thousands of mile journey, the months and months they spent, that they may not have even made it to the shores, and then they did, and then by miracle it was embraced, and then by another miracle it was brought over to the United States to what was it, the Pan Pacific, whatever that
Pan Pacific,
and everyone was
exhibition.
like, wow, that's a really cool music and instrument and dancers, and there you go.
And it was cool all of a sudden in a whole new way. But I love to think of it like the original iPod, because you're going on some adventure, and it's going to be 4 to 6 months of time on a boat. You're going to grab the one thing that is super portable and that has all your music inside it. Right. And if they'd had an iPod, they would have grabbed the iPod. But the closest thing they had was this machete, which had all their music inside it. And they could practically put it in their pocket.
Yeah, it's true, because it was so portable and small, yet sturdy enough to survive. So I never thought of that. That's very true.
And it also, because it's such a world traveler, which is something I love about the ukulele. Because it's such a world traveler, it also has cousins, all over the place. Whether it's the quattro or the cavaquinho or other very similar instruments that are connected genetically
Right.
to it. You know, it is part of a global. If you think of the machete and the rajao and the very small instruments like that, almost like sort of dandelion seeds, you know, that at one point in time just sort of started to move around the world as mobility increased. The ukulele has cousins everywhere.
And I
It's a
believe
wonderful
that
thing.
the originals are still over there in Portugal, Madeira, and all that. So,
Definitely,
yeah,
definitely.
and I remember.
Like Cavaquinho especially is also having a resurgence.
Yeah, in and isn't it pretty big? I think in Brazil too. It seems like it's a really popular instrument down there.
Yeah.
So this is where you can say, "Oh, don't quote me," but I believe that they tune it. Of There are tunings they use that are basically ukulele tunings,
Hmm.
not just whatever original tuning. So
Right.
yeah, they
That
kind of
is
cross pollinate.
totally. And you know, the tuning thing is sort of above my pay grade, but as you can see with what I'm doing with tunings, I mean, tuning is a fluid concept, and it is constantly evolving and changing. You know, people say, "Well, what's the right tuning?" Well, you know, that might be the wrong question. You know, it's just always growing and changing.
Wow, yeah, that is definitely beyond my pay grade. I just basically stick to the C6 tuning, and that's okay.
Oh
So
yeah, there's plenty of beautiful chords that haven't been played in C tuning.
yeah, well, and even at that, yeah, you can layer on if you multi-track.
Hmm.
Speaking of songs, though, do you have another song you want to play for us? Any?
Oh sure. Um, Let me see. Well, we're talking about layering on sounds. We're talking about standard tuning. Made me think. If I could ever get this thing in tune. It's the thing with the reentrant tuning is not always super forgiving. You know, the reentrant tuning is kind of like a little pocket-sized barbershop quartet. You know, and they have to be just right, and that's not just right.
I do notice that if anything is wrong, like intonation or strings are starting to give out, yeah, it's
Hmm.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is one of the songs on the album, Uke Heads. It is not a big banger. Most of them on the album are big bangers, and they're epic choruses and sing-alongs.
Wow.
But
Okay.
this one is called Solid Gold, and it is a more introspective thing. And in the chorus, but if it ain't solid
Yeah.
gold, that's where the band comes in, and they sort of join me on that floating kind of melody with some harmonies and
Nice.
stuff.
Yeah,
So
this kind of reminds me of Tin Pan Alley. Did you have that in mind, or did it just come out that
I
way?
kind of always have Tin Pan Alley in mind.
Okay. All right.
Because I mean, you see my sign up here, ukulele jazz, you know,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I do love those chords. I don't live and breathe jazz or sort of early jazz, Tin Pan Alley. It's all kind of mixed in a big soup,
Mm.
you know, historically. But I do love those sounds. I mean, you can't
Mm-hmm.
deny, you know, the
Six and
beauty of
nines
some of
are those?
those
Yeah.
chords.
Well, and even your turnarounds with the chromatics and things like that, very evocative of that period.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
It is.
So this is Solid Gold, which is in some ways in spirit like a song that I wrote for my album Man with a Love Song. And on that album, there's a song called The Satisfactory Waltz.
Hmm.
And it wasn't like everybody's favorite, but it was one that I felt really captured this idea of, you know, if it's a little bit broken, then great. You know, I think we hear a lot of love songs that are really idealized, you know, where it's kind of sets this incredibly high bar for everything has to be like, you know, like Titanic, you know, it's all got to be Hollywood and everything. But the Satisfactory Waltz and this one, Solid Gold, they both have this undertone of, you know what, everything's a little bit broken. And as Leonard Cohen would say, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So, Solid Gold. And so our love isn't made of solid gold, and there ain't a word that opens every door to the soul. Shame on me for believing everything that I've been told. Oh, that I've been told. Now it's cold as the night is long, and that old wind whistles lonesome cowboy songs. If I knew how to go, best believe I would be gone. Ooh, I would be gone. But if it ain't solid gold, if it ain't solid gold, if it ain't solid gold, solid gold, then it might just be something we ain't afraid to hold. That grain of sand under the mattress has grown, and pretty soon our pebble he's gonna be a stone. Is there still time before he gets too heavy to roll? Heavy to roll. And so that's the way it's gonna be. I guess that's what I get for keeping my heart up my sleeve. It's for your own good, she tells me, and I try hard to believe. Hard to believe. And if it ain't solid gold, 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 then it might just be, it might just be, might just be something we ain't afraid to hold.
Nice. Nice. And I again I stole this from the other podcast. So some of those lines were about your son. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true.
The grain of sand. Yeah.
Yeah, the
nice.
grain of sand. So the line is that grain of sand under the mattress has grown, and pretty soon our pebble, he's going to be a stone. And you know, it's kind of the spirit of the song to see things both ways. You know, to see the good in the bad and the bad in the good. Where, you remember the story, The Princess and the Pea, where you know there's that she keeps complaining because there's a pebble under her mattress, and they keep heaping on the mattresses, and she can still feel it, even you know it's like 1,000 mattresses high, you know. And just the idea that that little problem that keeps coming back to haunt you, it's just growing and growing and growing, and it's getting worse and it's getting worse. But at the same time, you know, that same image could be about your child. You know, that little tiny nothing is growing and growing, and it's the greatest joy of your life. You know, it's seeing those images both ways. I think is kind of the spirit of what I'm getting at.
Well, I think right. Probably Doug might be living that if one of his kids is going to leave for a while. Hopefully not forever, but yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Well, let's. What else did I want to talk about? Oh, the Uketropolis, your new. It's like you're rebooting, right? Is that right?
Well,
you're
I guess
rebooting your sites.
That's one way to put it. Yeah. I mean, rebooting or maybe amalgamating. You know.
Amalgamating, consolidating.
Yeah, consolidating is a good word for it, because I just got so many. I had so many irons in the fire when it came to educational stuff. It's always been something I've been involved with since day one. You know, my parents were both teachers, and I remember my mom driving in the car when I was in high school, and she asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? You know, like the quintessential parent question. And I was like, oh, I don't know, this or that or whatever I mumbled under my breath. And she says, well, just promise me one thing. She said, just promise me you won't be a teacher.
Yeah.
And of course, what happened, you know, half of my life has been devoted to, half of my professional life has been devoted to education. And the other half has been devoted to creating art and songs and being a performer. But and I've asked her about that since, and she says what she meant was try not to become a teacher in an institution. You know, if you want to be a teacher, that's fine.
Right.
Just don't get locked into the politics of school boards and administration and red tape.
Right. Yeah.
I think that was good advice.
Probably, and you know, you have to have both, and I do believe that you've chosen a good path where, you know, you can influence other instructors. I noticed Bernadette plays music. Bernadette Palazzo. Anyway, we've had her on the show, but she teaches a lot of ukulele on YouTube and online.
Oh yeah, I know her. She's great.
Yeah, and so, you know, you're influencing these people. I'm like, oh, of course she'd be on to listen to hear what you said.
Yeah, no, that was cool to see her there. I mean, yeah, it's for me, it's part of a lineage because I learned so much from my ukulele teachers. I mean, in Canada, it really goes back to Chalmers Doane, who is my, you know, one of the great mentors in my life, and you know, he lives 15 minutes that way. And
oh, is that right? He's still around there?
Yeah, yeah. And we play pool every Friday, you know.
Oh, nice.
So we still have a lot to do with each other. We've written books together and jammed and recorded and played concerts together. And, you know, he was the one who really back in the 60s had that brainwave that, you know, not only is this an instrument for musical joy and appreciation, because we know that, you know, we've known that since 1879. That's not a new idea, but that it could be the basis for a bona fide music education program, that was an innovation.
Yeah.
And that was passed on to people like Bonnie Smith and Jamie Thomas and Peter Luongo and a whole bunch of Canadian teachers who took up the torch, you know, in the 80s and 90s. And then it falls to, you know, the third generation students of that program like me to keep things going. And that's something I've always, it's just in my blood. And so I've always had these educational parts of, you know, my career, and all of a sudden I had too many. You know, I had the ukulele way, which was a method for solo ukulele, how to play all the parts simultaneously. I had my teacher certification program. That's a great program that my dad and I started. There's no other program like it in the world. And I had my ukulele in the classroom curriculum for schools that Chalmers and I had written together. And each one of these had separate websites, separate mailing lists, separate databases. And, you know, the websites were getting old, and it just got to the point where it's like, man, we got to pull these together into one place, or I'm just going to lose my mind.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what we did with Uketropolis, and then that became the basis for a whole bunch of new courses on top of that, like ukulele jazz, ukulele X for extreme ukulele, some free courses like Peace Like an Ukulele, which is a free sort of meditative composition that people can play at their own pace. Onboarding courses for absolute beginners.
Yeah,
we have a $1 course called Ready Steady Ukulele that's now being translated into other languages.
Oh, really?
And,
wow.
Probably the most popular course there is Booster Uke, which is it's like bet you beginners didn't know you could do this, because I'm really taking some fretboard phenomena and showing how beginners can play blues, jazz, gospel. You can do a lot more than you think.
Right. Right.
As a beginner, and that's what Booster Uke's all about.
I love it, and it's such a great resource. I was, so here's the conundrum. I'm finding because I love having resources like Uketropolis, and I think in-person workshops are still wonderful, right?
Yeah.
Still great. It's the business prospect. So someone asked me to do some workshops. I'm like, yeah, well, here's what I think I need to get to make it worthwhile. But it's like, oh, we can't afford that. I said, no problem. We can do it online, or start them off on the site. Oh, no, only in person will work. I'm like, I don't know. What do you think? Do they need the in-person to begin with, or can they? What's a path forward?
That's really two questions in one. If I can try to tease it out.
Sure.
My feeling, my humble opinion, is that what we saw with the educational experiment that was the pandemic, what I took from that, one of the lessons that I took from that was that you can sustain a community or a relationship in an online space.
Yeah,
but it's extremely difficult and unlikely that you will begin a relationship or a community in an online space. If they've already got the wheels turning, you can sustain it for a surprisingly long time, virtually. But it's a very hard place to begin.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not impossible. Not impossible.
Right.
But it's really hard.
That makes sense. And a part of the proposal that I wanted to do was like, hey, I'll if you get enough people, I'll start it off. I'll kick it off and do this, wonderful. Basically, I do the immigrants and origins of the ukulele, which 1879 plays a prominent role. But I go back even further to 65 million years ago when the Hawaiian Islands, were the little rift at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, and they started bubbling up. But that's where I was like, but the idea
so
would have
funny.
No, that's
that's a great place to start, because why not? I mean,
well,
because but do you have a class on the Big Bang too, or
not? I haven't done that one yet, but
okay.
Maybe
sure,
you never know.
Yeah.
Well, the whole point of why I wanted to bring that up is that everyone is an immigrant, and especially the Hawaiians, because some people don't know that in Samoa, the greeting there is talofa. It's like, well, that's weird. That sounds like aloha, doesn't it? It's like, you betcha it does, because that's where they came from. They came from the South Pacific, and all of that culture was there, and they brought it up with them. They both have Hina, one of the goddesses. I believe they both have a Maui story somewhere down there.
Right.
But the point being is that the Hawaiians were immigrants. It happened to be no one was there, but they were immigrants. And the ukulele was definitely an immigrant. It came over, right, and from a long journey. It immigrated over because they needed laborers. So just such a perfect thing. But come on, this is a great thing to celebrate, is the immigrants. And anyway, but I want to
Mm-hmm.
start off with that live in person and then transition somehow to online. But it's like, nope, no, we need
Mm.
it online and we need it in person, month to month, week to week, or whatever. So I don't
Wow.
know,
Well,
maybe.
yeah. I mean that the first question was, can the genesis of a community be virtual? It certainly can be. There's no question, because there's way too many examples where
Hmm.
that does work. You look at like Jim DeVille's group, the pop up uke
Hmm.
uh, group
Yeah.
that he's got going, and he has sustained that through the pandemic.
Wow.
I've joined them on many occasions as a guest, and they're having a great time, and they seem to be cruising along fine. And I know that group, started during the pandemic. There are
Really?
lots of
Wow.
examples of that, but I do think it's a heavier lift. There's no
Yeah.
question.
Oh, there's definitely, if you can build that community first.
Hmm.
So maybe
I mean,
they.
but the question is, can it be financially viable?
Oh, yeah,
It's one
that's
thing to
the hard
say,
part.
well, yeah, and I'd like a BMW, so
Hmm.
sure. Oh well,
Yeah.
yeah, but how do you actually connect the dots there?
Right.
That I don't know,
The
and that
problem,
may just be a deal breaker.
that's what I'm wondering, is because the problem is that if you get quality people, and I'm not saying um that I'm the most quality person in the world. I'm saying that if you really do want that, you got to be able to pay for it. And if you put all these restrictions on, well, this is the only thing we can afford, and we really want a good program that's going to
Hmm.
really take off. I'm like, well, I think the best way to do it is plan B here, where
Hmm.
you might have some in-person ones, but there are so many amazing resources like Utropolis, right?
Hmm.
So I want them to, dig into that, and it's like have a hybrid model somehow. But
Sure.
oh well, I don't know.
Well, I think hybrid can work too. The one hybrid thing that I've heard, I haven't tried it myself, but the one hybrid thing that I've heard surprisingly doesn't work is when you have like you've got a class of students that you're teaching, and then you've
Hmm.
got a webcam in the back, and then you've got a set of students that are tuning in live, on
Oh
Zoom or
yeah, yeah,
something,
yeah, yeah,
and you'd think that would be great. It's the best
yeah.
of both
No,
worlds.
yeah,
And as
right.
it turns out, that is extremely challenging. I've heard from a lot of teachers who say it's the worst of both worlds. You,
It
you
is.
cannot fully engage either one.
Exactly. And I,
you know.
I I'm in my day job, I do facilitation, Six Sigma. I'm a Scrum Master. Anyway, blah blah blah. But the one thing that I learned over time is that if I'm going to have a meeting of people, it's either all of us are online
Right.
or all of us are live.
Yeah.
You cannot do both effectively because you cannot keep those engaged. And
Right.
I keep that as a, like, if it all possible, that's what I'll do. It's like, I will make. In fact, some people say, well, we'll be in a conference room, and then these other people are like, no, no,
Yes.
everyone
Yeah.
will be dialing in, and we'll all be on the level playing field, because otherwise, one or the other is going to suffer, or both, usually.
I agree with that, and I think the only surprise is that that's so surprising. Like I think people, when we all started saying hybrid, 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 hybrid this, hybrid that,
Right,
that's the
right, right.
future.
Yeah.
I should have known right there. That many people can't be right.
Right, right.
When everybody was saying it, I was like, I should have been suspicious of that.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Oh,
I had to learn the hard way too, by through other people's experience, and hearing
mhm.
their feedback saying, don't do that hybrid thing. you know,
Oh, no, when I meant
not
hybrid,
in
I
that
meant
way. You're right. So what you're talking about is I don't know what I'd hesitate to call it hybrid. It's more like a blended approach where you've
blended.
got
Okay, I'll go with
you
that.
know
Let's go with
you
that.
know right, because it's different from hybrid in that sense,
Right,
where
right,
you're
right,
just
right,
saying sometimes you're going to learn online and sometimes you're going to learn in person. To
right.
me, that's a little bit different, and I do think that can work nicely.
Yeah, because you build the community when you're in person, and that does definitely, I think we're still human enough that that gels us together, right?
Hmm.
And I know even for myself, I don't have all the answers. And I'll bet you that someone like James Hill has been over the years collecting all of this somewhere, and I bet you'll find the answer there. So
Mm.
why not? I'm not, you
Some of
know,
the answers, anyway.
but certainly it will be more than I have or I have time to even document. And so why not? I'm not proud. It's like go find the answer. Look at James Hill. He's awesome. Watch the stuff there. Learn from that. And then if you have questions, come back to me. I'll probably be able to answer that and help you out. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway,
that can be a really powerful method. Something flashed through my mind a few minutes ago when you were talking about the immigrants and the connection between Hawaii and Samoa. And I certainly know my parents grew up in New Zealand. They have a Maui myth as well.
Oh, nice.
And there's a lot of
Maui,
connections
right.
through Oceania, and there's no question. But here's one for you. This is a new one for me. I have been working with a friend of mine, a colleague, and also a student of mine. She lives in India, and we have been working on a really exciting project that we've kept totally under wraps, and I'm slightly letting the cat out of the bag here, where we are using ukulele to explore Indian ragas.
Oh,
and
cool.
She is a wonderful singer and was trained in that Indian classical tradition.
Ooh.
And I've spent my life playing ukulele, and we met through the Jehui teacher certification program.
Yeah.
She was a student in that.
Yeah.
And I'm obviously, teaching that program. So, and we just connected over, this interest in, her interest in ukulele and my interest in Indian music. And she very patiently over the past year or more has guided me through understanding at least the bones of Indian classical music, and then translating it onto the ukulele. And that's going to be an amazing project. Now, I'll let you know when that comes out. We can have another talk.
No,
actually, we should have her on and me, and we can all chat.
Anytime.
But,
I would love it.
But where I'm going with this is that in Indian classical music, the ascending scale and the descending scale there's a name for each one. The ascending scale is called the aroha, and the descending scale is called the avroha. And I'm like, that's just too weird. That you have this musical thing that's called the aroha, and I'm like, where's the connection? There might be a connection to aloha and aroha. There may not be a connection. It might be just a cosmic coincidence. But I'm like, I don't know. It's just too close to the bone to think that there's no connection there. And so I put that out to any of your listeners. If they can show me a connection between the Indian classical aroha of a scale and aloha, the word that we all know.
Well, and of course, I think the origination of that was in the Oceania South Pacific area, and so who knows, maybe it went across somewhere, because once they went to Hawaii, they were basically isolated. That's the other thing. That's why I bring it up, that 65 million years ago in the middle of the Pacific, this chain of islands was formed. And someone brought up that through a fluke of geography, that is the most remote spot on Earth from any other civilization. In other words, if you go and try and go to another area with civilization, it is it's like 2,000 or 3,000. So they basically became self-isolated from there. But certainly the roots down there, I think they spread all over, didn't they? I mean, Maori and all of that. So
yeah, I mean, there's connections there that we can only dream of,
Well, I love this idea of that cross-pollination again, and I think the ukulele is a perfect instrument for that, just because of its roots.
And her point, and her name is Sai Lee Tank. She's got a great YouTube following and does a lot of wonderful ukulele tutorials. So check her out, Sai Lee, on YouTube. But her point is that, look, for her generation, the younger generation, one generation younger than me, for their generation, she feels they're losing some of their connection to the classical tradition that is so rich. I mean, the Indian classical tradition is so beautiful and rich and complex, and yet so pure in a way, and spiritual and all of that stuff. And yet the connection to it is being lost in this new generation. And what she's saying is, if you have to spend years at study, and you have to buy a sitar, and you're living in a tiny apartment, and you're not making a lot of money, the chances of you connecting to that tradition in a visceral way and a hands-on way are pretty low.
Yeah.
And what she's saying is, now we have the ukulele. If we could find a way for the ukulele to be a portal, a little tiny portal that a younger generation could connect through to their traditional music, maybe that would be a cool thing. Anybody could have that ukulele. Anybody could learn to play a few ragas, and maybe that is a gateway to a deeper connection to their own tradition.
Well, I hope that works, because that's a great idea, in my opinion.
Thanks. It's been super fun, and I've had some amazing musical discoveries of my own, just following her lead through all this.
You know, and you never know where this is going to lead. Have you seen? I know this sounds weird, but have you seen the movie Dune yet?
No, I haven't.
What? What?
No, I know. I've been too busy.
The music in there.
I'm too busy drawing Uke Heads.
All right. Buy the DVD or the anyway. Buy the one with the really good sound on it, because Hans Zimmer's just went out of his mind with the stuff. But the soundscape and the influences. It is not classical music. It is not rock music. It is kind of like, I don't know. It does remind me of ragas. Not that I'm an expert in Indian music, but just, I don't know. Go. You gotta go on YouTube and find the documentary on the music and just watch that. And
I've seen it pop up on my YouTube feed, because the algorithm knows that I want
I know, that's scary.
You know, right?
I don't like.
And now I'm like, well, Stuart and the algorithm are both recommending it. I better watch it. You know.
But anyway, it just reminded me of what you're doing. But just he fused these different elements of music that no one, and it just created this. To me, it's the best soundtrack I've ever heard on a film. No, the film itself, the movie itself is wonderful. I love the movie, right? But the music is so integrated and tied to the story. You just, without it, it would have been nothing, or not nearly as the experience. Anyway, sorry.
Right. No, I'll check that out. That sounds cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're almost at time here, because I know you have to. You have other things to do. I'll leave it up to you. You can absolutely promote anything. Tell me more about anything that we should. I'm going to have to try and recruit Doug, because there's so many great references in here. But Uketropolis, Uke Heads, what else?
Yeah. Well, really, my focus right now is on those two things. I mean, Uketropolis. I've always seen my career as, and for up and coming artists, I hope you hear me on this. For a long time, I saw my career as sort of a paradox. It was like I had this educational side of what I was doing, and I had this performing and sort of artistic side of what I was doing. And I was seeing those as like two separate mountains to climb, right? And I was looking at those two separate mountains, the educational side and the artistic side, and I was saying to myself, I'll never get there. I'll never get to the summit of both of those things. The best I can hope for is to sort of get maybe halfway up both. And that always felt like a compromise. And I always felt like I'm only going to be so good as a teacher, and I'm only going to be so good as a player and a songwriter, because I'm not committing to one or the other. And what I realized, and actually in some ways the pandemic helped me to realize, it's not really like that. And that's just an image that I was clinging to that wasn't doing me any good. You could take the exact same situation and think of it in a different way that is empowering. So the way I think of it now, instead of these two foreboding Mount Fujis that I'm trying to climb, I'm thinking of the educational side of what I do and the artistic side of what I do almost as like two legs of a giant machine, you know, and they're sort of lumbering forward one after the other, and lurching forward into the future. And sometimes I'm moving that educational piece forward, and sometimes I'm moving that artistic piece forward, but together they kind of lumber forward.
Yeah.
And to me, I sort of, in a flash, just got out from under that whole image that was keeping me down. And so, if you know, ukulele is an instrument that calls on you to do both. You know, very few people get booked to play an ukulele festival if they can't also teach a workshop.
Exactly.
And vice versa.
Right.
So if you're a young person listening to this and you're thinking, I want to have a career as an ukulele player, I hope you hear me on that. You can do both. I encourage you to explore both, because both are wonderful in their own way. Education is very artful, and your art can be educational. And I think that's where Uke Heads comes in. Uke Heads says it can all exist in the same pot, and it's going to be very hard with Uke Heads to draw the line between where the artistry ends and the education begins and the community ends and the fun begins. You know, it's all just in one big melting pot. And isn't that a wonderful thing? It's taken me a long time to get to that stage where I'm not seeing those distinctions the way I used to. All that to say, come join the fun, ukeheads.com. It's going to be quite a process, quite a really interesting few months ahead, and I hope people listening will check it out and join the band.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll promote it everywhere we can, and I think it's a great thing. I love how you're reframing your goals, right? Because you know, trying to meet that expectation, that I would guess that there's a lot of prior expectations that pushes us in that direction, right? Well, we got to be best in this or that,
Right.
but we can't do both, or you know, it's not. And here's the gold standard, right? You know, we got to become a rock superstar or whatever, a Jake Shimabukuro or whatever, you know. But I think what you are striving for is you're, I guess, you know, the lumbering. Sure, that you're creating your own path, and that's wonderful. So we celebrate that you're figuring that out, and it's totally unique and right. You know, that's, and I think it's really good advice if someone wants to get on the ukulele festival circuit. Yes, bring something to share. You know, you got to perform, you got to have good music, and you know, bring something to share with everyone, and that's a perfect formula for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't have said
Awesome.
it better. Well,
all right. Well, James,
thanks, Stuart.
You're welcome.
Fun as always to catch up and to just have the elbow room to stretch out and have a nice conversation. So I miss seeing Doug, but give him my best, and
I will.
We'll do this again sometime.
All right. Thanks so much. So we'll just do the traditional on three. We'll say aloha, if you wouldn't mind. So I'll just count to three. 1, 2, 3. Aloha. All right. Awesome. Thanks, James.
Thank
so
you,
great
Stuart.
to have you.